I go back and I'll reread what I wrote the night before, and I'll just be like, I don't think I like any of that.
Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is others-focused. What will they think?
It has to be done a specific way, and it has to come across a specific way.
Hi, I'm Max.
I'm Drew.
And I'm Leisha.
Plot hole.
Said I'd write one chapter, wrote none.
I'm sorry, you do what?
I changed the ending again.
Rewriters.
Countless blueprints.
Infinite stories. And now, into the story. As writers, I think we can all speak from personal experience that we are all in some manner or form perfectionists. So I wanted to kind of open up that discussion. My first question for you guys, which is, what kind of perfectionist do you think you guys are? Because Max and I have talked about this at length in our personal lives, because perfectionism doesn't just affect us when it comes to our writing, it affects everything that we do and often how we view ourselves. So we talk about it quite a bit. I guess like some examples. I'll use Max as an example. Max is what we call a perfectionist to detriment, which is if he can't execute it perfectly, he won't try, which it affects his writing probably the most severely. For the most part, like I think he's come like a really long way from a personal standpoint on like, just putting his best foot forward. But with writing, it has been a particularly tough blockage. I'll let him talk a little bit more about that, but we'll start with Drew.
So my perfectionism is I go back and I'll reread what I wrote the night before, and I'll just be like, I don't think I like any of that. And I'll just like highlight like a 2 pages worth of writing, backspace, and I'll just rewrite it and just rewrite it and just rewrite it. And it gets to the point where it like, I'm not progressing with the story. I know that I'm going to have to come back and rewrite this eventually. So my perfectionism is battling that version of myself where I'm trying too hard to get the first draft to be as good as it can possibly be. When in reality, the best thing for my story is probably just to get the entire story down. And then I can go back and work on actually, spicing it up and livening the prose and the dialogue and all this stuff. But it's hard for me to battle that because I want it to be perfect early on. I think almost selfishly, so that way I don't have to worry about going back and redoing it later. But I'm definitely going to have to. It's for sure going to like happen where I'm just gonna want to go back and redo that. But my perfectionism is probably that. Like I get stuck on a spot until it's like good enough to where I feel like I can move on. When in reality, I should be moving on much sooner, probably.
Yeah, I could feel that. Perfectionism is the great challenge of my life, and it's hard. It's hard to not compare yourself to others. I was just looking up quotes about perfectionism, and Brene Brown, who is
A gift to this planet.
yes, my mom loves Brene Brown. Oh, Brene Brown is? Sure.
I don't know who that is now.
She's like a self-help like lecturer, basically. She's got tons of different self-help style books.
Oh,
But she says healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is others-focused. What will they think? And that is the great detriment to my writing has been I will write something and I'm like, wow, this is great. This is awesome. I'll come back to it and I'll read it as if I'm a reader and I say, wow, I can see this is wrong. I can see this is wrong. Honestly, I'm coming back to it looking at it as a Redditor, really, at the end of the day. Like, Reddit is like the ultimate place where dreams go to die, I guess. It's just
you're just being
it's
hypercritical,
just people.
or
Yeah, so like I'm just looking at it like super hypercritically, like, well, that doesn't make sense that this person didn't do this, and what about this? They didn't do that. Like, would they really walk like that? Like, would they really talk like that? Like, it's just what the others might think. That's really like what perfectionism does to me, at least. It's just I'm writing something and it's like, well, they might think that and everything, but like, why am I hedging my bets on something that they might not like when it's something I do like right now? It's like, I don't know why I treat it that way. And I won't start off this conversation by saying that I have mastered perfectionism in any way. I am not perfect at my perfectionism. It's really bad still. I have noticed, like Leisha said recently, like that I'm starting to get to that point where I can start to say no to that perfectionist a little bit more. And just say, actually, I want to write this. I want to do this thing. And sure, I want to do it the best way I can, but that's why God gave us second drafts.
No, that's really great. I just wanted to throw in there a just a little tidbit of information that, or a bit of advice that was given to me a couple of years ago that I actually think was really really great advice. I lived in Mexico for a couple of years, and when I was there trying to learn how to speak Spanish, my Spanish instructor gave me a piece of advice that was, he just said, stop trying to be perfect right away with your Spanish. You're not going to be. It's not going to be possible. And the best way to actually improve with your ability to speak Spanish is to make mistakes as fast as possible. He said everybody who learns Spanish is going to make between 50 and 100,000 mistakes when speaking to local Spanish speakers. How fast you learn to be a good Spanish speaker depends on how fast you're willing to make those mistakes. And I think something similar applies to writing. Is how fast, like, you're not going to be perfect on your very first draft ever. And the best way to make that draft as good as possible is how like fast are you willing to make those mistakes, and to just continue on and just continue with the story. Finish the story, get through all of those mistakes, and to then go back having learned and then improve them.
There's a lot of truth to that. I know, like from a psychological standpoint, like even if we just look at like when we take a test, we actually remember the questions we got wrong better than the questions we got right. Like those stick with us. Those are the things that have been proven time and time again to help us learn better. So I think that piece of advice is really great. It's something to kind of remind yourself throughout the process, like when you have that tendency to be a perfectionist, to really just power through, because you'll come out on the other side having really learned and ultimately achieved something. When it comes to my perfectionism, I've always had very self-oriented perfectionism, and I think you guys have touched on this quite a bit. I think Max is more conscientious of what others will think. I have always set up really unrealistic expectations of myself, and this like extends to the amount of sleep that I need in a week, or the amount of tasks that I can take on at work, or the things that I can fit into a day on top of Max's schedule, or the things that my son needs. Like, I do this to myself constantly, and when I don't meet those things, it can be real detrimental to my health. And from a writing standpoint, I've always kind of had the same mentality where it has to be done a specific way, and it has to come across a specific way. And when I don't achieve that, I will do it over and over and over again until it's perfect. I've definitely moved away from that more, especially as I've been writing more and just really leaning into discovery writing. And that's been really awesome for me. But I know from a perfectionistic standpoint, like sometimes I have to remind myself to be realistic, like to be realistic about what I'm capable of. What do I have the bandwidth, to bring that word back up again, to do, and just be willing to admit when something's too much. Like saying, I as much as I want to commit to this thing or do this thing, that's overexerting myself to a degree that I'm not capable of. I had to learn very quickly in adulthood how to say no. Because being the yes person was exhausting. And I mean, here's the thing. You can always have yes days. Sometimes a yes day is awesome. Especially like when you extend it to like your kids and the things that they might want to do. Like yes days with Jackson are amazing. It's one of those things where I've had to be really conscientious of it. So for me, it's always been characterized by like really unrealistic expectations, and then a lot of self-criticism when I don't meet my unrealistic goals.
Do you feel like there's a lot of guilt that's involved with not meeting those unrealistic expectations that you set for yourself? especially when it comes to writing?
100%. I feel a lot of guilt when it comes to that. And I think it even extends into shame. And I think that that's what I attribute most of my shame when it comes to writing to. I could be writing a text to someone, and if I notice there's a single typo and I can't edit the message, it will stick with me for at least an hour, you know? And so you can imagine what that's like with my writing, where if I'm going through and even if I'm just proofreading, which the whole purpose of it is to look for the mistakes and edit them, I really struggle with that aspect of it because then I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this right the first time? Like, how did I miss that? Because I find myself going like fixing mistakes all throughout my process of writing. It doesn't tend to slow me down too much, but yeah, it can definitely be. It makes it a very arduous process.
I had a friend, and Drew, we've talked about we've talked about National Novel Writing Month before. So November, for those who don't know, National Novel Writing Month, and there's a program out there that basically you have like a self challenge to write a 50,000 word novel during the month of November. They call it literary abandon. There's a reason I've only ever finished the challenge once, because in the 7-8 years I did it, I could not get past that perfectionist in me. Like, I couldn't just sit down and just write and not think at all and just get it out onto the page. And I had a friend who did it every single year. Like, she did it 11, 12 years, and she she got 50,000 words every year. Sometimes she get down to like 70, 80,000 words in 1 month. Like, and I asked her once, like, how she did it. And she happened to be writing at the time. I asked her, and I looked at her computer screen, and she literally had nothing on the screen except little red dots everywhere on her page. I realized she was writing in white font so that she couldn't even see what she'd written. So I'm not gonna like encourage that because she also would never read what she wrote later on too. That just like that mindset of just I'm just gonna do something in a way that's not gonna make me think about what I'm writing and just
That's
coming up with that.
brilliant.
It's brilliant. I'm not a big fan of it, but
Concept of literary abandon, I think, to a perfectionist is about as appealing as like sitting on a cactus. I think that as a perfectionist, like the idea of like abandoning that like in your editor is mortifying. I think that using tools like that though, like if like finding something that works for you so that it's like editor no editing is so important when it comes to combating your inner perfectionist and moving forward with progress. So, kind of transitioning a little bit more into the meat of the episode. For both of you, what are some of the tools that you found have been really effective for you guys personally when it comes to combating that perfectionism? I mean, and Drew, you've touched on this a little bit, but like really combating that inner perfectionist and just moving forward and continuing your writing.
So I have because like Max, I find myself more in the sci-fi fantasy style of writing. I have a like lore document, like Word document that I can reference. So that way I'm not like I can keep things as consistent as possible and I'm not having to like check myself constantly based off of like solely memory or something. And so I have that document has, the map that I made for the world. It has, my regions with their paragraphs and all this stuff like that I did in the world building process. I have all of that like on my second monitor so that if I ever get to a point where that's relevant and I feel stuck, I can just quickly reference that document. Oh, that's right. This is what's happening here, or this is what like this part of the world looks like, or here's what the people are like there. And I had that information is readily available, and I can just okay, I'm no longer stuck on this. Let's keep going. That's one of the smaller things that I do. I would say.
previously, like I don't remember a time where I wasn't going back and editing everything over and over again and just not escaping chapter 1 or not escaping, you know, sometimes I'd go back and scrap the whole story idea and I'd restart the whole thing too. But recently, as I've like learned more, as I'm doing more discovery writing and learning more about my story and about my world and my characters, I've gone back and I've added like one line to a chapter that would help explain that further. To like, oh, I realized that just recently I realized that they're like my magic system kind of is not just kind of random, like it's got actual people can actually use it and everything. And I thought, well, my first chapter, the characters are all in prison, so it's like does the prison have a way to regulate like people that are coming in and they have magical abilities that could maybe blow a hole in the prison wall? And so I literally just added like 2 sentences. I didn't go back and I didn't edit the whole chapter to make it work better. I literally just added a couple sentences in a place that made sense and I moved on. And that was like huge progress for me, was just being able to say, I'm going to come back to this later and I'm going to flesh it out along the way. But for now, I'm okay with just adding a little bit and then not taking away from what I've already written.
Something
And not.
else. Sorry, something else I wanted to add that you actually taught me, Max, was
Mm,
if you get to a part of your story, specifically with fantasy and sci-fi, although this is definitely a thing with other genres, uh, but if you get to a point where you don't know the answer for that bit of world building, for example, let's say I don't know, let's say you have a magic system where people use wands or whatever, like Harry Potter, but you don't know what the spell is called, and you're just sit there like, I don't know what to call the spell. I don't know what to call this spell. The piece of advice that Max gave me was put in brackets in your document spell name and then just continue the story. That's something that you can come back to later that is not super important. The name of this spell has no bearing or effect on how the rest of the story is going to go. And that's an important that's a detail that just it doesn't matter right now while you're trying to work on progressing your story. Just brackets character name, brackets spell name, brackets magical creature name, whatever. Put it in brackets, highlight it in a different color so that way when you go back through to do your second draft or to do your revisions or whatever, oh, yep, I remember I never came up with a name for this spell. Let's come up with one right now while I have the time. But while you're in the mode of trying to progress and write, that's been so helpful.
it's also how I got through college too, by the way, was as I was writing, I just put things in brackets and said, come back to later.
I am literally so annoyed that I've never gotten this piece of advice from Max, and we've lived together for so long.
What?
I've never heard you say that.
No.
It is a great idea, though. I love that. I think it's a great tool. I feel like, for me, something that's always been like really important to me is I just abandon it. But I put but here's what I do is I put a pin in it, really. And then I move on to something else to take the time to just, I think, scale back from the situation at hand or the scene that I'm trying to write or like the what I'm trying to accomplish. Sometimes switching a task makes it so much easier to be able to come back with a better mindset, because sometimes like I'll get really stuck and it just puts me in such a bad mood with this particular scene. But then I go, I also know that I can be working on this scene. So let me go ahead and just transition over. I'll come back to this a little bit later when I feel a little bit better. Then I find that makes my writing go a little bit more smoothly, so I'm not like hitting my head against a wall. I think another thing that's also been helpful for my inner perfectionist is something that I think is like my number one fear personally as a perfectionist, and I think many perfectionists out here will agree with me, is like there's like a fear of failure. Sometimes I struggle to know whether it's like letting myself down or letting like people who would be reading my story down. I think it may be a combination of the two. As I've been writing, like just kind of reminding myself throughout that process, like, if this doesn't work, like I'm going to know and I'm going to trust my gut. I know my story best. Even if just one person really enjoys what I write, like that's enough for me. Even if I'm that person, like I'm the person that really enjoys my writing, that is enough for me. Because I think when we're getting to the root of perfectionism, it's what you're really trying to figure out is like, is this good enough? And I think for everyone that looks different, and can be quantified differently. But for me, I think just being like, just really focusing on if it pleases me has been really great for combating that perfectionism.
I think we need to kind of adopt a mantra of just asking if it's good enough and just saying it's good enough. Like that should never be, and that sentence should never end in a question mark, because that's what puts us back. I feel like that's what is this good enough? Perfectionism just asks the question of like, well, they might not like it, so why? What's the point? And it's just such a we're trying to tell the future at that point, and not even telling a story. Just tell a story.
It feels almost like I don't know, you're trying to gamble, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So you might as well get your story down on paper, and you can worry about if it's good enough when you're like querying for agents and editors and stuff, For right now, get it down on paper, see what your writing group thinks of it, make a couple of tweaks, and then just start like querying for with agents. And if an agent, ever responds and they're like, "Hey, I think you have a really great idea here. If you changed this, this, and this, I'd work with you."
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Suddenly the changes and that you need to make to your story are quantifiable. They're tangible. It's like, oh, okay, I now know like what I need to do. But when you're still in the process of writing the book down, and unless you're like a multi-time published author who knows what works for their audience and what doesn't, just write. You're never gonna find that answer.
I think I realize too now, like you're not even just trying to predict the future for readers. You're trying to predict the future for your characters too. We don't all know what's going to happen in the stories that we're writing. Like we have some ideas of where we want things to go, but things change.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're also like not being fair to your characters themselves, just saying like, well, that's not good enough for you because it's not going to work out this way for this part. Well, you don't know that yet, actually. Not until you finish.
It's also kind of funny because it reminds me of this joke that I make to Max all the time. It's it's self-deprecating, but like what I tell him is it's not my responsibility to find me attractive. That's the joke that I make a lot. And so when it comes to my writing, like something that I've had to really embrace is just like it's not my responsibility to find my writing satisfactory to somebody else's standard. Like everybody's going to have their own criticisms and critiques of my writing, like even within like just our small group. Like I haven't shared a ton of writing primarily because I'm still figuring it out. Also, like when it comes to the scenes that I write, like I am like it's constantly time skipping all the time. So like I'll be like, oh, but I want this thing to happen. I'll go back to the previous thing. And then, oh, I have an idea for this thing. And I do that over and over and over again. So if I were to share a document, it would be so disconnected. I realize that especially like right now, there's no way I'm gonna know my audience. I have no idea who my audience is. So there's nothing like that that's stopping me from just pushing through and continuing to write. I don't know who my audience is. And right now it's just myself.
The way that you write is unique to you. And not everybody's going to love it, and not everybody, and some people might really love it. I feel like a lot of it also comes down to also wanting to be a perfectionist, but also wanting to be a people pleaser. I feel like a lot of people who are aspiring authors are also people pleasers because they want to write something that other people find enjoyable.
I'm realizing now too, I think what we read, we expect those to be our audiences too. Like so Drew and I are both big Brandon Sanderson fans. I've tried. I know all you Brandon Sanderson. What do they call themselves again?
I have.
They have like a specific like. There's like a name for like fans of the Cosmere. I can't remember it.
World Hoppers.
World Hop? No, it's like The fan site has got something like
I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, um, I think like at least I think I expect Brandon Sanderson fans to like my work, and that's very ambitious. Also, that's expecting like that's assuming that all of people that read Brandon Sanderson like the same things, which is not true. And people who like Brandon Sanderson may not like what we write, or maybe they like what we write better than they like Brandon Sanderson. But we have no clue of knowing that until we get it out there. So that's where that progress part comes in. And I really, I think we should mention too that we have a progress goal as a writing group too.
Yeah.
Did we say September?
It was September, yeah.
September was our goal for finishing a first draft.
Yes.
That is now
Closing in so fast.
4 months
really,
away.
really is closing in very fast.
It's very, very fast. Here's the thing. That's our goal. And this is the paradox of like perfectionism for me, is that a goal can be motivating to get past perfectionism, but if I'm not making that goal, I will start thinking badly about myself and my writing, because now I'm questioning, am I just writing to get to the goal? Am I actually writing my best? But the point of it is, we wanted a target and we wanted to aim for that. If we make it, I don't know. But wait, what are you gonna say?
My basketball coach in high school, he always gave us this piece of advice. It was aim small, miss small. So he was a hunter, and he said, whenever I go out to go do my yearly deer hunt or turkey hunts or whatever it was that he got drawn for that year, he said he would always tell his sons, aim for a hair or aim for a feather. And that's the point of goals, right? The point of goals is to aim for something very specific. So even if you come up a little bit short, you have gotten way more done than if you had just been like, yeah, I'm going to write a book. I don't know when I'll finish it. We'll see. But because we set a goal for September, even though that anxiety of like, crap, am I going to finish this in time? Is this going to be my best writing? Like that little devil on your shoulder is just like whispering in your ear the whole time. By the time we get to September, whether we finished it or not, I promise you we will be much further along than we would have had we not set a goal.
Oh yeah. I mean, actually this brings up another question that I have. Me with the questions today. This is actually something I haven't thought a whole bunch about, which is funny because this is literally what I do professionally. But like when it comes to setting goals as a perfectionist, I don't know. How do you guys does being a perfectionist affect your goal setting? Like, for me, it's pretty detrimental to my goal setting, but like for you guys, what does that look like? Like what is actually setting a goal? Like obviously we've talked about that our hope was to have a first draft done by September. Like that's an example of a goal. I mean, we each have different ways of divvying that up and making that more like setting a smarter goal, I guess you could say, with how that's going to be broken down over the next few months. But like just kind of in general, when it comes to even just the smaller things that you guys want to accomplish, like whether it's in a day or in a week, what does that look like?
So actually, referring specifically to this goal, is I remember we had talked about doing it by the end of the year originally. And the perfectionist in me said, oh yeah, I could do this in a year. And that's, that gives me plenty of time, And of course, perfectionist's best friend is procrastinationist. Procrastinator. Procrastinators and perfectionists is like, ugh, that's the worst combo. I have that.
So bad, yeah, same.
I have that. It's really bad because then you're like, oh, I'll do this later, and then later comes, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's not good enough, and yeah. But then I remember Drew specifically saying, I think that's too long. Like I think that's too far out. I think we need to make it a closer goal. So we decided on September. I think end of September, I think is what we talked about. But
I think we set a specific day. I think it's in my calendar somewhere, but it's in September sometime.
Yes, yeah. Actually, that's smart. Putting it in the calendar, I need to do that. But like, just having that like idea of like, wow, this, even just this one goal has taking extra steps to get out of that perfectionist mindset and get out of the procrastinator mindset and saying, okay, I'm going to bring this actually closer and we're just going to do it. We're just going to push for it. And that's just it.
Yeah, I think when we talked about that goal, it definitely felt like a stretch goal for both of us with our current circumstances with work and family and other things, right? But if it was a stretch realistic goal, but to kind of answer your question a little bit, Leisha, was I try to like gamify it. I set like daily objectives, that I try to accomplish every day. I do it more for work. I would probably be better served to do it for writing as well as other personal things in my life. But I write down like all like the whole. So at the beginning of the week, I sit down, I write down all of the things that I know need to get done that week. For work, other than the things that are going to surprise come up, because things always come up as a shock at work, right? Something always happens. And then I just sit there and I get to like check these little boxes. And I've done the same thing for writing, or in the past. I've kind of let myself get away from it a little bit in the last couple of weeks. But I set, I break it up into really small bite-sized chunks. At an absolute minimum, my goal is I need to try and write probably about 500 words today or each day in order to meet that goal. And I think that's still the case. I might have to redo my math, but I think 500 words a day is still like on track to meet that goal. But like Max said, procrastination is brutal. I'll sit down at the end of a long work day and be like, man, I know I should write today, but I'm exhausted. I'm wiped. So I'm actually just gonna watch a TV show, or I'm actually gonna like play some games or whatever. But I think gamifying it has really allowed me to make real progress as when I've followed it more strictly in the past.
I want to get back. I'll get back to the goal setting part, but I do want to get into this tangent of procrastination because, like, it's funny because I understand procrastination to a point. I've always been pretty disciplined. So when I get an assignment at work, for example, I'll do a little bit and I get a deadline. I'll do a little bit every day. As the week goes on, my work might ramp up a little bit, but it's manageable. I'm not panicking, when the due date rolls around. Sometimes I even get it done ahead of time because I have a good chunk of time that I can really dedicate to it. And then I don't have to worry about it the rest of the week. Max, on the other hand, I've watched so many times, having been with him during his senior year of college, as well as through the first year and a half of his master's, where time and time again, the assignment would come and I wouldn't hear of anything until he says, I have to get this done. And it's due in a couple hours. I've seen that over and over and over again. So I do want to bring up, this is my, what I will call our first official worm of the week. Just something that I've just been thinking about as I've just kind of been having these thoughts kind of circle around in my head. I watch a lot of TED Talks, and one of my favorite TED Talks is Tim Urban, Inside the Mind of a Procrastinator. And I don't know if you've seen this, Drew. I think Max has.
I've seen this.
He basically talks about how in all of our heads, everyone, but procrastinators especially, inside your brain, you need to imagine a instant gratification monkey. And the instant gratification monkey's one job is getting instant gratification. So, especially when you have an assignment that you have to do, your instant gratification monkey is going to say, no, I understand this is something we have to do, but I really want to do this one thing. Or, oh, I forgot I had to go do this. Or whatever the excuse may be at that point in time. Then eventually, as the deadline looms closer, you begin to have, what did he call it?
I have not seen it in a very long time.
Basically, there's the anxiety monster, I believe is what it's called.
I think so, yeah.
And it scares the monkey into finally taking control of the ship that is your mind to accomplish the task. For many people, and here's the thing, is that I don't think procrastination is all bad. For some people, having that pressure is what pushes them to work their best, For some people, that pressure is required. I am not one of those people. I don't thrive on procrastination. It stresses me out a lot. Like I always feel bad if like more often than not if I like am late on a deadline or something along those lines, or like I made a commitment, it's typically because I forgot about it, or like I didn't write it down, or just, something kind of, innocuous like that. Yeah, so it's funny to hear you guys talk a little bit more about procrastination because it's not something that I've dealt with a whole lot throughout my, academic and professional career, but I understand it to a point. Like it's very easy to just decide, you know what? I'm going to veg because that's what I want to do. I want to sit here and watch a season of SpongeBob and decompress. So,
I would like to defend myself at this point, please, Your Honor. I No, I'm just kidding. I can't defend myself. I The thing with procrastination is I was pretty motivated to get it done in that day beforehand. I would spend like I would pull an all nighter, or I would work until 2 a.m. Take a 2 hour nap, finish it out in the morning. Like I would get things done, but here's the thing: they were 12-page essays, or they were 8-page essays, or whatever it was. It was not a 350 word novel or 350 page novel. 350 word novel would be beautiful. 350 page novel, and that's the thing. And then also like there's no professor's deadline and grade hanging over my shoulder right now to do this writing thing. It's literally it's just me, and it's. I mean, we talked about writing groups in our last episode, but like having that accountability aspect is helpful when we're trying to avoid procrastination and perfectionism too. At the end of the day, like that kind of like deadline, like wait till the last minute thing, it works for some things, but I don't think it works when you're trying to really tell a story, to really put something onto the page, even if it's a short story. When I've written short stories in the past, I like to write them like the first draft in one go. I will write like a 2-page short story and just that. Like I'm done with it. Like I write beginning to end, and I'll go back and I'll take a couple drafts of it instead. But again, like there's no deadlines or anything other than self-imposed ones. So at the end of the day, like waiting to the last minute is not really a thing unless you're waiting till like I don't know the day before you die. But that'd be dumb.
I feel like if you have the desire to write a book, you're probably by nature an ambitious person. And
yes.
ambitious people are also perfectionists and procrastinators. It's actually been really funny. My YouTube feed has been flooded with videos that all have some variation of the title. If you're ambitious but lazy, watch this. And it's really interesting because, like you said, Max, you can't just like procrastinate on a novel for multiple reasons. One, there's not really a deadline if it's your first novel. If you've published 2 or 3 books and your editor is like, "Hey man, we need this book by, such and such day." There's a couple of things with that. One, you can't wait until the night before to write a 90, 100,000 word novel. You can't. It's just not going to work, right? And so I think that's why in our last episode, bringing up, discipline was so important in that, in the ability to make progress on your novel. So I guess my question is, Leisha, I guess this is probably a better question for you, considering myself and Max are huge procrastinators. What exactly is your process for avoiding procrastination? Because you said the stress of that really gets to you. So what
Mhm.
does your process look like for avoiding procrastination and overcoming perfectionism?
Oh, and that's a great question. I think ambition is the key word here. Because I think there's ambition with direction and then there's ambition without direction. And I think that ultimately when it comes to steering away from perfectionism and procrastination, giving yourself something to aim for and drive toward is really key. So for me, like even when I'm taking on like a new work project, like I have to have the well defined boundaries of what the expectations are. So like I want to know what exactly it is that I need to accomplish. From a writing perspective, I need to have an idea of what it is that I'm wanting to accomplish. And sometimes it's just I just want to put I just want to write these many pages. Other times it's like I want to get to this specific scene or I want to flesh this out so that it's a complete chapter. So I'll have like different goals like that that kind of pop up throughout the week. And that for me is really key with avoiding procrastination. It also helps me stay excited about it. I guess you could like in some ways I do gamify it. Like I remember doing this like my first semester of college. Like for every week that I you know, did really well and got all my assignments done and then could have just like the weekend, I would reward myself with a pudding cup. It was literally the stupidest thing I've ever done because it was so simple, but it really helped kind of set me up to where like reward was being like having it done, like being accomplished. And that sense of accomplishment is for me not always the easiest to earn, but when I do feel like I've earned it, Max says like to earn our pillow, at the end of the day that we've accomplished everything that we've needed to, it makes me feel so much better. And that like continues to feed into my ambition and my drive to keep going. So it's a really great motivator, I think, to combat both for me.
You know the movie Meet the Robinsons?
Yeah.
That's what's been playing in my head like this whole episode. It's just keep moving forward.
I thought you were gonna say he's got a big head and little arms.
That's really funny because I've been thinking about Finding Nemo with Dory when she's telling Marlin, "Just keep swimming,
Just keep swimming."
keep swimming.
Hey, that's a good one too. Yeah. I think here's the thing. My instant gratification monkey in my head. I think I have like this I think it's like a demon that I have a pact with at this point where it's like I have to feed it at some point.
It's a gremlin.
It's a gremlin. It's if it doesn't get fed, like it will eat my brain. Like, so for me, I actually give myself a little reward. This is where we need video.
I know
episodes. This is, I have to give my reward kind of up front, or at least in tandem with the effort. So like,
so the work should be rewarding, is what you're saying.
No. I'm talking about a physical like food. I'm talking about food. When I like specifically go to coffee shops to do my rating because I get a drink with there. Like I get like a hot chocolate or I get like a bagel or something, and I look forward to that alongside my rating. Like, and it helps my instant gratification monkey to be satisfied. And then he's off there, drinking his hot chocolate while I get to write.
So you're like baiting the monkey, throwing the scone in one direction, hoping that it'll distract the monkey.
I'm just trying to distract the instant gratification monkey at this point.
I was gonna say it's like a banana on a stick or something,
Right. I actually really love that. That's really funny. Well, I want to ask Drew. So, like, obviously, for Max, he allows himself the reward along with the process that he's undergoing to get the thing that he needs to get done. For me, I give myself the reward after I've completed the thing that I set out to accomplish. For you, what do you feel is more like what you relate to more?
Probably rewarding myself after. I view it more as like making minimum payments on like a credit card debt or something. Like at an absolute minimum, I need to write 500 words today. If I feel inspired to go beyond that, by all means, I'll continue. But if I can finish that, then once, all of my other things are taken care of that I need to get done, the end of the day, it's my time to kind of do what I want. It's the banana that I'm putting on the end of a stick. It's like, okay, you'll get this little, like, you dangling it in front of, like, you'll get this little banana if you at least write your little 500 words today. And gosh, that's such a funny visual in my mind. But
it's like putting your dog on a treadmill with the treat in front at the front.
I was gonna go for the like the Minecraft reference of like carrot on a stick with
Yeah,
like a
with
pig.
the
Like,
pig. Yep, exactly. But then the thing is, so okay, that's actually really great. The thing is, you have to follow through with the reward, though. I think this
Yeah.
really relates to parenting. Hey, if you get your room clean, you can have a cookie. Or if you don't get your room clean, you'll have I don't know, a couple minutes of timeout or something. But I think being able to trick your brain into realizing that you will follow through on the reward slash punishment will actually make developing that habit much easier. I think it's all about following through on that reward. I grew up on a farm. I trained a lot of dogs for moving cattle around hayfields and things. And when they did something that you wanted them to do, you want to reinforce that positive behavior. And not to say that we're like dogs or animals or anything, but like having that positive feedback loop is going to make not procrastinating so much easier going into the future once you've developed that habit.
I mean, I think I mean, here's the thing: is that like with with my background in psychology, classical conditioning is such a key component of like how we get things done all the time for ourselves. So while we may not be Pavlov's dogs and we're not like drooling at the sound of the bell, it's one of those things where like when we can really apply sometimes like even just the most basic like base rewards to ourselves, it just makes I think it makes the process of writing something that you can really enjoy. Like if I sometimes I feel like if I didn't follow through with a reward for myself or like I didn't feel as accomplished as I do when I complete my goals for the week, it'd be really hard to enjoy writing. Like that's something that I don't want to lose as a writer. Like I want to continue to enjoy writing. So I think incorporating things like that is really important. So creating that positive feedback loop becomes detrimental to the writing process.
I have to say, like, the reason I reward myself like during or even at the beginning of like a writing session is because I want the reward of writing to be writing. Like I want that like feeling I got like when I wrote that first chapter of this current book I'm working on. Like at the end of that, like I felt like like a high that I haven't felt in a long time. That I was so accomplished that I got that done. Like I actually could say I finished that part. I'm moving on to the next part, and I'm really excited about it. And I want that to be my reward, and so that's why I want to be I want to focus on getting to that point. So like all that kind of like this talk of like rewards, gamifying things and stuff. That's just to get me into the seat to write. I don't feel like I'm as motivated by like okay, I'm gonna get a cookie at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
I do this thing because at the end of the day, and then I might sit there and be like, ah, it's just a cookie, you know. I'll get one. I'll try again tomorrow. I'll get a cookie tomorrow. I'll just I'll have something else instead. I don't want to be caught up by that. I want to be like motivated to get the thing done because I want to do the thing. And so if that requires me getting a hot chocolate or sitting in a comfortable place or whatever it is to get me comfortable, that for me is what helps me turn off the perfectionism, turn off the procrastination, and get things done.
I think I might be like a Pavlov dog. No, but I, I definitely see where you guys are coming from. I think you guys had mentioned earlier that like that sometimes procrastinators are the way they are because they need that stress or whatever to be able to actually lock in and get the things done that they need to get done. I for sure
Right.
feel as though I fall probably a little bit more into that category than doing things ahead of time.
Hmm.
Which is why I personally view it as a minimum payment system. Like, okay, I can relax once I get this done, and I know at the back of my mind that like I I enjoy writing. I want to be a writer. And I guess I use that excuse as a way to get my butt in the seat and to write. Because I can't think of a time where I sat down to write and once I got started, I wasn't sad to like get up and stop.
Mhm.
Every time I sit down and I finally get going, I'm like, oh man, you know what? This actually is so rewarding. This actually is so much fun. It's just I think it's more the thought of starting writing that has been so hard because I know how long it takes for me to get into the zone, which is why I think I use the reward at the end as a way to like bait myself into the chair to start writing.
Yeah.
But I think you guys also brought up like really great points too. Like you really do just want to like do it for the love of writing, right? I don't know if there's any other way that you really could do it, right?
Right. And to like even push further, like I for me the reward at the end is what helps me get through the middle part, which is where the like at first like motivation to sit down on the chair and start writing starts to fade a little bit. And you're like, ooh, I am losing steam. And it's like one of those things that just pushes me just a little bit more, of something to like really look forward to. And so it's interesting that each of us kind of have different takeaways when it comes to like what it is that helps propel us in the direction and helps us really dig into the fact that each of us enjoy writing and have unique ways of which we try to look at the reward of it. Because, at the end of the day, regardless of what that reward is or when we receive it or whatever the case might be, each of us enjoy writing enough to make it work for us and to create positive processes that help make it a good and rewarding experience and encourages us to do that's like to repeat that pattern over and over again. And I love that this is where the conversation has taken us, especially like coming from the perspective of perfectionism, because for anyone out there that's really struggling with perfectionism, I hope that this kind of acts as a guide of where to kind of push your thoughts when it comes to how that process looks for you. And obviously, we're just three examples of what perfectionists and procrastinators do when it comes to making progress and finding our work fulfilling and seeing that our work is good enough. So, I hope that ultimately is the takeaway from like everything that we've kind of gone over in this episode.
All right. Now we're just going to go into our weekly word count segment. How did we do this week?
So for this last week, I wrote a total of about 1,187 words. I did a little bit of research that I didn't include as a part of my weekly word count. I was doing an outline for some correspondence that happens in my book. So I didn't include that, but it was a pretty solid week.
For this week, I wrote 1,358 words. Still not like quite hitting my daily word count goal, but way better than last week. So progress is progress. I'll take it.
So technically, my count is 0. Technically, I did do some work on a chapter this week that I didn't write anything. I just was kind of rearranging it, and I found where I want to go with it now. Because, and I talked about this. I don't know if I talked about this previously, but I had this whole segment of like the main character goes shopping, like right after he gets out of prison, and it was just the worst. I like looked back and I was like, man, this is so dumb. So I wanted to actually have some good character moments and stuff. So I've got a different track. I'm actually going with some of my original thought with it now. So technically I didn't write anything this week, but I have direction I'm headed this week.